Hey fam, this is D. Lloyd of the Turning Life Corner Show, where we make you visible. And today we have two guests from the Ron and Brian Show, and we're gonna sit down and talk a little bit about what's going on in the political air of the day. Okay, so Ron and Brian, come on in. How you guys doing?
Good. How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Welcome.
As I see, the Ron and Brian Show originally aired on WCDB FM in Albany in 1992 and 93. And after about 25 years of hiatus, you guys reunited for a 25th anniversary show on WCDB, which led to the creation of the Ron and Brian podcast in May of 2018. Now, what I see here is that you guys pair up and give your opinions and comedic takes on American culture and current events with a heavy emphasis on national politics. And you've also become known for your weekly bits. I like that. Drink of week, beef of week, and this week in racism. Okay, so when you're not talking about what's on your mind, Ron works in the hotel industry in Philadelphia, right here, where this broadcast originates, and Brian is an HR professional in New York City, Manhattan, the Big Apple. And for more info, before we get up, for more info, and we'll probably try to put this on the screen sometime during this conversation, people can visit you at www.ronandbrianpodcast.com. All righty. So how you guys doing today?
As well as can be expected, given everything that's been going on the last 6 months.
Oh, who are you telling? So
it certainly has not been boring.
No, it's not been boring, and it's also been a mite scary.
Yeah.
Because we're in uncharted waters.
Yes.
So we're going to get right into this, all right? Because before we got on together, I was looking at a little bit of the George Floyd funeral. What's each of you guys feeling? What's your takes on that? And now, has that started a social movement that will last?
I sure hope so. I think that as somebody who has pays attention to what's going on in their country as much as possible, I certainly hope that that we have an opportunity to take something as tragic as the unnecessary death of a human being and hopefully figure out a way that society can be improved as a result of it.
Yeah, we discussed this on our new episode that we recorded last night. And, while there has been, while we've seen protests in the past, I don't think you've seen it to the magnitude that has happened, due to the George Floyd murder. Protests in literally all 50 states, protests around the world, internationally, supporting Black Lives Matter. You have to hope that this is a turn towards something more positive than what we've seen in the past. Okay,
now I always like to look at a big picture when something is going on. And for me, it seems almost like, depending on what camp you're in, some people want everybody to focus strictly on the police and policing. And me personally, I say, well, wait a minute. This is the right time to talk about everything, such as the racial wealth gap, employment, housing. It's all a part of what's going on. Policing is just one little piece of it. What's your feelings on that?
Yeah, without a doubt. You look at, situations in housing and how the redlining policies that were in place, decades ago were still impacting people. The wealth equity is is greater than it's been at any time. I think I read, something along the lines, for every $100 in wealth that a white family holds, a black family holds $5.04. Looking at minimum wage, looking at healthcare, why being tied to your employment, if you're even lucky enough to get healthcare. People going hungry, people that don't have clothes, people, without a roof over their head, people without mental health access. Again, policing is a component of it, but to your point, there's so many things on a national level that we need to look at and address to really start to fix this issue.
I was going to say, I couldn't agree with that more. I think, the more that you expose yourself to the different experiences that people are having in America, you realize that there are multiple Americas going on every day that we live and breathe. There's some people who are living secure lives in suburbs on their lawns and playing in pools. And there's other people that walk out of the house every day wondering, am I going to come home alive? Am I going to survive whatever happens to me today as I walk through the society that I live in? I think that if we can take this and try to turn it so that we all are living the best possible lives that we can, to me, that's the goal. That's the goal. I think it's a shame that we have allowed this bifurcation of different Americas to exist for so long.
Right. Now, and you touched on something that I want to go to, but while we're here, I want to ask this question that I ask every guest that comes on my show. This is my moniker. This is my thing.
Bring it.
What are you guys' individual feelings on reparations?
Brian, I'll let you go first.
I think that I don't know how it plays out, but I absolutely believe that the African American community has never been given the opportunity that the European Americans have been able to enjoy over the past 400 years. If reparations is the path to get us to a better level of equality, then I don't see any harm in it. I mean, one of the things that we talked about yesterday on our podcast was just the fact that when the coronavirus epidemic, hit this country and whatnot, there was absolutely no sense within our government that whether we could afford the amount of money that we threw out there in terms of the $1,200 checks to every American citizen. There was no hesitation in the billions of dollars that we threw to corporate America to ensure that big business was never hurt as a result of that. Yet when it comes to reparations or healthcare, it immediately becomes a whoa. How are we going to afford it? How are we going to pay for it? Whatnot. If reparations is the vehicle to ensure that African Americans are given a bump towards equality, I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I would agree with Brian on that point. I mean, we discussed, you look at South Africa and how at the end of apartheid, they had their Truth and Reconciliation Committee that, their job was to look at how families were negatively impacted, by apartheid and how could things be made right, either through amnesty for crimes they were charged with while fighting apartheid or financial, reparations. Kimberly Jones had a great video that's gone viral where she puts it in great terms. She says, Black people have been playing Monopoly, and for the first 400 turns, we didn't have anything on the board. And for the next 50 turns, anytime we got something, you burned it down. So how do we become equal now, unless we start the game over and we try and spread this wealth around somewhere? So there has to be, I don't know what form it takes, but there has to be something to try and level the playing field and make sure we're all as equal as possible. Right.
And the thing is, to begin, the United States has to make it aware that they know that there is a debt that's owed. That's first and foremost. Once they do that, then I think everything else can be put together like a puzzle. But what they're trying to do, especially people like Mitch McConnell and other folks of his ilk, they always say, well, we give you these programs now and everybody's on the same footing. But to him, I say things like, okay, how about if we put you on the 50-yard line, we start at the goal line, you want us to run to the other goal line, but you have a 50-yard head start. Never be equal. We'll never catch up. That's what it's like without reparations. So, but that's one of my pet questions that I ask. And, everybody has an opinion on that. But we're going to go back to what you were saying, Brian, about people actually living a certain kind of way in this country. What do you feel about the Drew Brees situation? Because everybody has a different little take on that. Well, what do you guys take on?
In terms of Drew Brees, I think you've got you end up with it's a tricky situation for a celebrity. He's an athlete, I know, but he is a celebrity at this point, where they're trying to they're asked a question, and they have an opportunity to take a stance on something. They have an opportunity to placate what they feel are the people that are already supporting them or whatnot. They have a stance to say, hey, we want change, or we want to make the world better. And I think with Drew Brees, you absolutely got someone who, when handed a microphone, when asked an important question, sat there and gave an answer of, this is what I think my fans want to hear. And you see it all too often now in the world now, where celebrities are asked questions and they they give the wrong answer and immediately are backed up, to the point where a perfectly worded apology is issued by their PR company. I think he answered the question completely poorly. I think he gave the wrong answer. And I think that when he realized that he potentially was going to lose fans over it, immediately threw out a blanket apology to try to back up what the stance that he took. You see it way too often nowadays.
So in your estimation, this before Ron, you give your answer, the question to Brian is, so in your estimation, you feel as though he was being politically correct coming back with his apology, but you think those were his true feelings that he came out with first?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you know what? I don't know what his true feelings are. I don't know Drew Brees whatsoever. I think he gave the answer of, this is what's going to make me the more popular with New Orleans Saints football fans. This is what's going to make me more popular as a quarterback in the NFL. And I think that it wasn't until he realized, wait a second, my answer had the opposite effect, was suddenly this apology thrown out.
Okay. All right, Ron, what are your feelings on that?
I think, he answered, I think, based on this bubble that he lives in, being a star athlete, being a multimillionaire. He has his viewpoint, and he talked about, his grandfather's service in the military and fighting in the war, and I think his issue was, I don't think he failed to really acknowledge, the act and why athletes are kneeling. He looked at it with this stance that people who are against Colin Kaepernick and those that are kneeling, saying this is disrespectful to the flag, without even looking at the origin, where Colin Kaepernick had a discussion with Nate Boyer, former U.S. Green Beret, who said to him when Kaepernick was initially sitting during the national anthem, said to him, if you knelt during the national anthem, that would be more respectful to the troops and to the flag than sitting down. So I think, I think it's blinders in the case of Drew Brees. And to Brian's point, I think he needed to make an apology. I don't think Drew Brees is a bad person. I don't think he intended to hurt anybody, but I think I don't think he was educated. And Maria Taylor on ESPN had some comments about him where, she doesn't know what's in his heart, but it was very telling to her that he just went right in and said, this is disrespectful to the flag, without qualifying and saying, you know what, I understand why they do that, but I feel this way and this is why. by just going right into it, it really showed just a lack of vision and a lack of understanding what's going on.
Yeah, and it's funny because the Boyer guy, I really hadn't known that he had gone to Colin Kaepernick and told him this until I saw his story on YouTube or wherever I saw it on social media. And then I said to myself, well, how come that was never highlighted when all this was going on, that Boyer had went to him and said, as a former Green Beret, I think that would be something that you could do. See, if he had to come out maybe and said something, or if that story was highlighted, I think it could have been seen in a different context, because he did do something that someone said wasn't disrespectful. But now it comes out so much later.
Well, and you do have to ask the question, why was that narrative ever put out there? And, I mean, you're dealing with a man who, I think by the NFL's not quite admission, but the fact that they settled with him, blackballed him from the NFL, didn't allow him to get a job. I wouldn't be surprised if they also put pressure on the various sports media outlets who rely on the NFL for a lot of their income, to maybe be like, don't play this up, kind of sweep this information under the rug. So it's all about, as we see across the board in media, it's all about who's controlling the narrative.
You're right. And the funny thing is, I was looking at a sports talk show, and they were talking about there was one NFL player that came out and said, well, when's Cap going to get a job? And then the narrative there was like, well, do you think he wants to be a quarterback now? Because his persona is so much larger than going back to the NFL. So, it's going to be tricky, but I'm glad. It's the one thing that's happening in all of this is, see, many white people have such a comfortable life. They don't understand where people are coming from. And sometimes I'm not going to let them off the hook because they can see, but they don't believe. And if you're not living that type of life, it's hard for you to understand it, i.e., when the police are patrolling in your neighborhood, hi, officer such and such. But in another neighborhood, you watch out for that guy. See, they don't understand the dynamic of it. And that's the one thing that is being brought out in all of this, that it's not all rosy like everybody thinks. So what do you guys think is what is the one thing that you think will definitely, other than the policing thing, because I don't know where that's going. They're talking about defunding the police. And see, they're trying to change that narrative too.
Right.
Get rid of the police when defunding is something totally different.
Yeah, I saw today that the NYPD, the New York City Police Department, their annual budget is $6 billion. And there's talk. There was talk today of lowering that number to $5 billion. And one of the NYPD officials said, oh, yeah, there's absolutely no way that we're lowering our budget. I mean, I cannot imagine what $6 billion goes towards.
Well, and someone else I saw made the comment that, these days, cities are police departments with less funded services, tucked around them. And that's what it's come to. If you look at, I think they pointed out Columbus and the police department budget was 82% of the total money that the city spends on services for the citizens. And it's more of a percentage in major cities than our percentage of defense is in the national budget.
Now, and I'm so glad you said that, Brian. Because this is another one of my pet peeves, and one of the things that I really I do on the radio is I try to expose things. And okay, now you just said you heard it was $6 billion, and the New York City budget was $600 billion.
I don't know. I don't know what the number is, but they wouldn't. The issue was that they wouldn't even acknowledge that it could be lowered from 6 billion to 5 billion.
But okay, but there were some reports that it was 60% of New York City's budget.
It's outrageous.
But then again, on a different station, it was reported as 6%. So, and therein lies where I'm going with this.
Right.
The media today, and I'm not going to say because of Donald Trump may have exposed it. The media is so unbelievable that you really don't know what to believe anymore. You can't believe people because you'll hear, if you're a conservative or if you're Democrat, Republican, it's just all over the board. And the craziest thing I thought I ever heard in my life was when Kellyanne Conway said, an alternative truth. Yep. And what do we have today? Alternative truths.
Mm-hmm. If I go back to I wasn't alive in the 1950s, but the sense of the media back then was that there was a responsibility in the media to pass along the facts to the people. If it's our job to make sure that the public is aware these things are happening. And you look at the media now, and it's almost as if they wake up and they decide what the narrative should be. Then they go out and look for facts that will back up what they want you to believe. You look at the major news stations, and they're all clearly aligned in one of two camps, either liberal or conservative. It's so difficult now to find a media outlet that simply is telling you this took place today without a spin of this is why you should feel this way about this one incident.
And if you do find one, it's usually something written on the internet by one of the internet authorities, because they have no dog in that fight.
Yeah, I find that BBC America provides me with a less slanted news of what's going on in my country than my own American media.
Yeah, that's true, because they have no dog in the fight.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask this. How has the pandemic affected you guys? And what are your feelings on this pandemic? Because everybody I talk to, even strangers on the street. I was in the supermarket earlier today, and me and this guy was talking at the vegetables, and I said to him, "Did you ever believe that in your life you would have to deal with a pandemic?" I never even thought about it other than being a student of history, but we're actually living through one. What are you guys' feelings on that?
Ron, if I can interrupt for 1 second, I'm going to say this.
Of course.
It is a historical fact that these things take place. It is, if you are, like you just said, it's from a historical reference, pandemics take place. They are absolutely something that happens. Did we, we are overdue for one. If you followed these things before 2019, the scientists were saying it's going to happen. It's not a question of if it's going to happen. It's a question of when it's going to happen. So you knew that it was going to happen. I think we all got very comfortable in our existences that this was not something that we ever had to fear. Yes, it was something that we had to fear. And I think that it's, this is what I find the biggest shame of it all is that it's been politicized. That you've got that as a result of the largest public health crisis that's taken place in this generation, you've got people that are responding to it based on how their politicians are promoting it. You've got some people who are saying this is a sham, this is fake news, this is a political scare tactic to keep you from going out to vote. You've got other people that are sitting there locked in their homes, afraid to go outside, afraid to go to the supermarket because because they're listening to the World Health Organization, and ultimately you've got a lot of people who are not being exposed to facts, but are being exposed to opinions.
Mm.
In terms of how it's affected me personally, I was sick back in March. I was sick for a month. Physically, this is not something that I would pass along to tell anybody that it's something to take lightheartedly. I know, I think we have to acknowledge that the threat that it poses to different people is not exactly the same. There are communities that have been ravaged by this. There are people with diseases, with poor health that are been ravaged by it, and there's people that are they're not even feeling a threat of it.
I know that's crazy part.
And as somebody with the COVID antibodies can say, this is not something that you should take lightly.
So you had it yourself. Did you have to go?
Yes, I did. No, not at all. I self-isolated. I quarantined myself at home. I lost about 20 pounds over a 3-week period of time. Wow. And then one day I woke up and started to feel better.
So give us a little synopsis of how it came on you. And,
I live in New York City, so I take public transportation every day. So I'm taking 2 to 3 different subways. Between the time I leave my house in the morning and by the time I get to my office, I am within 6 feet of several hundred people. And you're breathing it all in. It's part of the toxic cocktail that New York City was back in March. It's one of the reasons why so many people got sick, because it's a public transportation town. It's not an area where you wake up, you get in your car, you drive to work. You're working with 5-6 different people. You get in your car and you drive back home. There's a mixture of germs that's just floating around. So there were a couple people in my office that got sick. I knew some other people that got sick. There's so many people in New York, and there are so many diagnosed cases that it's very hard for New Yorkers not to know somebody who was sick.
Yeah. I'd have been surprised if New York hadn't been the epicenter because of how closely combined everything. I mean, you can't do anything in New York unless you're around other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period. So
absolutely.
That was the epicenter. But now the craziest thing that I can see is I've talked to some of my friends in Arizona, some in New Mexico, even some in Iowa. And when we were having it here in Philly, in Jersey, in New York, they were like, "Oh, we're out here having a ball. We're not doing anything." Yeah. Look at what's happening now.
Their rates are going up.
Yep. So how did it affect you, Ron?
Well, I was laid off in late March. Being
virus.
Because of the lack of people staying in hotels. And it was tough leading up to me being laid off. I had to lay off all of my staff, people that had worked for me for 5-10 years. What we look back at now, and what's so amazing to put into perspective is, we would have a call with owners of the hotel towards the end of each month. And, at the end of February, we're having discussions about, there's this coronavirus thing over in China. It's impacting the, people that can come to, Philadelphia to visit. So we think it's going to have a minor impact on our industry. And then a month later, it had literally decimated the hotel business across the country. For me, I guess I was involuntarily self-isolated. My wife had to start working from home. But it's been tough. My in-laws are 84 and 76, so we haven't been able to see them. My mother's 78. Obviously have not been able to travel to see her. But then I see the other side of it because my brother, he's a small business owner in upstate New York. He has apartment buildings. He has some restaurants. And so, it's tough to watch it on that end because you understand why these businesses have been shut down, why these restrictions have been put in place. And But then you see, someone like my brother who is taking money out of his own pocket to make up the difference from unemployment to what his people were making, just to make sure they're taken care of. And not a lot of people are doing that. And I got to have a tremendous respect for him for doing that. But like Brian said, we've been long overdue. And when you think about how many people just, being in a suburban area like I am, the number of people you interact with going to the store, how many door handles you touch, how many items you touch that other people have touched, it really, makes you wonder what the new normal is going to be like whenever we eventually come out of this. And again, we're coming out of it now, but it might not be the right thing to do. You look at North Carolina, their cases are shooting up. Florida, Georgia, places that had opened up a few weeks ago, now they're out of that 14-day period and the numbers are going up. We'll start seeing that, we finally got to yellow here in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, even though they decided not to open outdoor dining in Philly. But I drove through Montgomery County and the places that we're doing outdoor dining were packed. And, the outside dining is, 6 feet apart. But then you look at the line of people waiting to get tables, and they're all right on top of each other. So what have we learned?
It seems like we haven't learned anything. And the most frightening thing of all is all the experts are saying, watch out coming fall and winter.
Right.
And people don't realize that we don't really have a way to treat it. All they can do is, if you get really sick, is put you on a ventilator to sustain you long enough to hopefully your body will build up the tolerance to kill it. So we don't have a way to really treat it. We don't have a vaccine. We don't really 100% understand how you get it. Mm-hmm. So it's just something that's here that unfortunately we have to learn to live with. You have to take those precautions. I don't go out anywhere other than right around my home without a mask.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I'm astonished when I go out and see, even older people, they don't have a mask on, and this is what I don't really get. I know they say is the mask is to keep you from transmitting it to someone else, but I see people with the mask on right here.
Yeah, with the nose exposed.
I'm saying you're only half protected.
I think there's a large degree of a lack of education, and not in the sense that the information is not out there and it's not being promoted, but we have a lot of people that don't want to take in the information. We have a lot of people in this country, and I think it's part of the American ethos where it's just I know better. I'm going to listen to my gut. My gut tells me that I'm not going to catch it, so therefore I can walk around without a mask on. Or, you know what? I don't like the way I look when I'm wearing a mask, so I'm not going to wear it. Or, and this is the part that gets me the most, is that their news outlet is telling them that this isn't a threat, that this isn't something that they need to be concerned by. The news that they're exposing themselves to is actually telling them that this is not a real threat, that this is not really dangerous, and they should just go about their lives, and that we should liberate our states and just kind of open the floodgates and let every store open and let people do whatever they want and touch everything and breathe on everyone. And it's, you look at what took place in Europe, you look at Italy, you look at France, and is that really what we want here in America? It scares me. It scares me how we've reached a point in society where we no longer want to accept that somebody else is more educated on a subject than we are, and that we will not take that expert opinion because it does not go with what our gut says.
And I think if more people could be exposed to what we've seen in New York City, literal forklifts loading bodies into refrigerated trucks, just out on a city street. And your typical person out in, the flyover states or in areas where, because the population is so spread apart, it's not as big an issue for them. They don't get to see the impact that it really can have on people. And even if you survive it, a lot of people are damaged for life. Their lung capacity is damaged. People have had there was that Broadway star that needed to have both of his legs amputated because of blood clots.
Yes.
And that's the other scary thing. Like every time we think we hear about everything that the coronavirus could potentially do to your body, then we find out more negative impacts it can have on you.
So it's really it's affecting the entire world population, but it infects each person differently.
Yeah.
That's the scary part.
Right.
Yep.
But let's move a little bit over to our commander in chief. What are you guys' feelings on him?
Well, we did not start injecting ourselves with bleach as per his suggestion. We felt maybe that wasn't the. We have talked about this a lot, and the one thing, and I don't know if Brian, you said it first, or the one thing is that we wondered what the worst thing that could come from a Trump presidency would be, and we are now seeing that. Between his response to the pandemic and his response to the George Floyd situation, his response to the protesters, you are seeing the impact of someone who cannot accept the opinions of others, cannot accept that there are people more educated about certain subjects than he may be, and how someone who does not have a heart or compassion for most people runs a country. Yeah,
it's amazing. My brother and myself, when we talk, we all, how Trump, he just says everything he does is the best, the brightest, the most. So we were talking the other day, and I was telling him, the only word I don't think I've heard him use to describe something he does so great is stupendous. And sure enough, my brother gave me a text where Donald Trump texted out something was stupendous. So I'm lost for words now. I don't know where this guy. From being from the East Coast, we knew him.
Yes,
we knew him.
Yes.
But I guess I don't understand the psyche. Or I guess I do understand the psyche of America, looking for him to be different. But he exposed the racism in America also, and that's a problem. But do you think that we'll be having, or will he want to push another stimulus before the election?
It's hard to say. If you look at the stock market, it is pretty much back to where it was before. So if you look at the people that are driving the political agenda right now, which whether you like it or not, it really is the Republican-controlled Senate. If there's going to be another stimulus, they're going to throw it towards corporate America. If you look at what took place back in March when everything was being shut down and the original stimulus package went through, it was only the Democrats in the House that were the ones that made the argument for we need to put some money in the hands of the people. People need to be able to pay their rent come April 1st. People need to pay for their groceries right now. The Senate was literally sitting there saying, heaven forbid the cruise industry is affected. Heaven forbid the airline industry is affected. That was their priority. If you look at at what's taken place with the stock market, I think it's risen 44% from its low. It literally has just bounced completely back as if there's absolutely no devastation that's going on in this economy right now. I'd be very hard pressed to believe that Donald Trump is going to sit there and say, hey, let's put some more money in the pockets of the people, because the truth of the matter is, I don't believe that a majority of the people are going to are supporters of his. I think a majority of Americans are not the people that are going to run to the voting booths if we have voting booths in November, but they're not going to be the people that are going to sit there and say, yeah, Donald Trump was there for me when I needed him the most. I think a majority of Americans are going to sit there and say, this man doesn't represent me. I think it's corporate America that is going to sit there and send their lobbyists into Congress. And if there's a dollar that's going to be squeezed out of the federal government, I think it's going to go there.
Oh, okay. That's a thought. I didn't think about that because I was thinking that might have been Donald Trump's ploy to say, look, I'm going to get some more money to these people so they can maybe come around to my way of thinking. What's your thoughts on that, Ron?
I think, I think there's two things that could potentially, get Trump to support a stimulus package. I think number one, seeing how the poll results continue to come in. I mean, CNN poll showed him down 14 points nationwide to Joe Biden the other day. Other polls have shown him anywhere from 7 to 10 points down. So I think obviously he's a man that looks at the polls continuously. And I think the fact that the news is starting to come out that, this recession started in February, not because of the pandemic. So, he is a master manipulator of the media. And so if this story about the recession really starts to gain traction and he wants to knock that story off the front page, what better way to counter that than if he is the person, telling the Republican Senate, we need to get checks with my name on them. We're not going to send them out without my name on them, but get those checks out to people and get money in people's pockets. I feel that might be the only thing that would encourage him to do that.
Well, you know what, Ron? It's funny that you mentioned that with his name on it. And this is, I really didn't even know this was going to happen. In yesterday's mail, my wife and I received a letter with both of our names on it that said, this is just something that we're giving you from the White House to, giving you a reminder of the checks that we sent you. And at the bottom, Donald J. Trump's signature on it. So he's getting that information out to remind you, I gave you some money. So that's where that question came from, because I'm like, this guy sends out a letter to remind you that he gave out $1,200 to most Americans. It's shameful.
Well, and I think,
absolutely.
I think the response of government to the amount that they sent to people really shows how they don't get what the average American is going through. Like Steve Mnuchin, said, "Oh, we're giving you $1,200. That should last you a good 60 days." In what area of the country, is that going to even pay for gas for 60 days for a lot of people? You look at Canada. Canada's giving $2,000 a month to all of their citizens. You look overseas, Germany, Italy, doing much more to subsidize individuals and less to subsidize companies. And that, to me, I'm surprised there's not more outrage about, how much help all of these companies have needed. It's been beaten down every individual consumer's throat. They say, oh, you should always have 3 months worth of savings. You should be able to pay for 3 months of bills. Always keep that in the bank. But you mean to tell me you have multinational corporations that have a bad month and have to declare bankruptcy or are looking for a handout? Why are they held to a different standard than the American citizen is?
Right. It's shameful. That's why I have a problem. I always tell people, when it comes to politics, I really don't care if you have a D or an R behind your name, because you're not for the people, because you're always doing something for themselves to be better off. They're not really taking care of them. They give us as citizens chicken feed, and they look out for themselves and their cronies. And most people don't realize that. That's what gives me such a headache, that people just don't want to educate themselves on that.
But there's also such inequality in terms of wealth that's taking place in this country. I mean, Ron, you just brought up how many companies had a bad month and suddenly they were filing for bankruptcy. One of the things that was heartbreaking for me back in March was watching the video footage of the food banks that literally were running out of money, running out of funds to provide food, and how many people literally out of work for a week, 2 weeks, suddenly were unable to pay for groceries to feed their families. Like, there is such a large chunk of the American population that it literally is living paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. And we call ourselves the greatest country in the world, but when you really look at it numbers wise, there's not that many people that are enjoying that greatest nation in the world experience and are scraping by. paycheck by paycheck, month by month, just, okay, we survived another month. Let's try and survive another one. And, there's so much wealth in this country. You've got people like Jeff Bezos with Amazon. How many billions of dollars is that guy worth? And yet on that very same, and don't get me wrong, he created a company that's provided a service to the country and the world that is highly valued. But there's so many people, the multitudes are just scraping by. It's heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, and speaking of Bezos, he's one of the reasons why a lot of these people don't have jobs, because he's knocked a lot of people out of the manufacturing and selling and sales and everything. Because if you don't sell on Amazon, you're going to miss out.
Right.
Yeah. Mom and pop shops are dead.
Yeah.
People like the convenience of picking up their smartphone. They like typing in, Amazon.com, punching in what they want, and they like the ability of getting an email. Ooh, your product has been shipped. When there's stores literally within walking distance or a short drive that will sell a product slightly more expensive, but you're helping your local economy.
And it's funny. I remember when Amazon first started. I was teaching middle school history in Newcastle, Delaware, when Amazon started, literally around the corner, as a small warehouse that shipped books.
Yeah.
I remember that plain as day. And look, 25 years later, it's mind-boggling.
They sell everything.
I know. If you can't get on Amazon, you can't get it.
Doesn't exist.
Now, before we go, I was talking earlier about how you guys have weekly bits, drink of the week, beef of the week, and this week in racism. Would you guys like to leave my audience with a little bit of one or all of them that you do, or talk about it or something?
I mean, I guess, drink of the week is, fairly self-explanatory. We will typically put a poll up, put one drink against another, and people can vote. And that's what we'll drink while we record the episode, because you get a little parched at times. You don't want to get a dry throat while you're recording. Beef of the week is just, beef of the week is just maybe whatever our minor complaint is for the week, any minor injustice, first world problem, if you will. But I guess the one that people kind of listen to the most is This Week in Racism. And that was born from back, I guess you could give Barbecue Becky a shout out for helping to create This Week in Racism, because I think she was one of the first people where they really caught someone on video and really gave her a catchy nickname, and it really went viral. And, we're sitting there and we're like, you literally every week could find 3 or 4 or 5 of these people being wildly racist out in public and being caught on video. And so, we capture those stories. We talk about them. We play the audio, and then, we will basically put one up against the other. People can vote for who the worst is. And then at the end of the year, we do a March Madness style tournament to crown Racist of the Year. And, part of why we do that is, there's the outrage for the first week or so, and then the story kind of goes away. And by trying to keep the story going, we try and, I think it's kind of our way of putting it out there, where people, I think people got very comfortable prior to 2016 saying, hey, racism really is on a decline in this country. And if there's anything we've learned over the last 4 years, it was more hidden. It wasn't declining. It was just more in the shadows. And now it feels more comfortable being in the light. And I think people need to point it out more often, and point it out with whatever platform they have available to themselves.
Well, all of those are worthy little bits. Now, I tell you the one thing that I like to do is, and I'm gonna give it a name now, because I've never given it a name.
All right.
You guys have inspired me to give it a name. Because one of the things on my show, my moniker is "We Make You Visible." Turning Life Corners, we make you visible. And I always say, pay attention, because it's happening right in front of your face. But the thing that I think I'm going to name now is free schools and dumb people. Because We have free school in the United States, but some of the dumbest people do some of the dumbest things.
That's very true.
Absolutely.
And so I think I'm going to start getting together a whole bunch of different things that people do that are dumb, and see what we can go with that.
I like it.
But I really, this has been almost an hour, if you believe it or not, and I enjoyed talking with you guys. I think this platform where I met you guys is a winner.
Yes, agreed.
If not, I wouldn't have run into you guys. But I'm going to use it again. But we're going to have you back sometime in the future, because now you're a friend of the show, and I'd like to thank both of you for coming on tonight's show. You have any final words?
I would like to say thank you for having us on, and we would love to return only if you're willing to come on our show.
My pleasure.
I love it. Let's set it up.
It's reciprocal.
Yeah. Perfect.
Just again, thank you for having us on. It's been a great time, and we just encourage people out there to try and be better to each other.
Okay, one last question, guys. Who is your favorite football and baseball team? Each one of you.
Yankees and football. I'm going to go Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
They were terrible for so long, and that's what I loved about them, and now they're good.
Okay. How about you, Ron?
NFL I don't follow as much as I used to. Used to be a Cowboys fan, which I know is an ugly term here in Philadelphia. But I do like the Chiefs. Love Mahomes. Hate the Patriots. As far as baseball, I will turn the camera a little bit, and you will see the New York Yankees shrine that I've built in my basement here. So lifelong Yankees fan, having grown up in upstate New York.
Okay. Well,
who are your favorite teams?
Well, I'm a Yankee fan through and through. I don't know if you can see my.
I think I saw the Giants banner back there.
A Giants banner back there.
Yeah, I'm a Giants fan also, and you know what? And the craziest thing about that is, I have an original snapback Giants hat from their very first Super Bowl.
Really?
Nice. Oh, yeah.
That's a nice collectible.
Have offered me all types of money for that.
I believe that. I believe that.
But, it's been real, fellas. I've enjoyed this hour. And
we've enjoyed it, too.
Come on the guys' show. Please stay in touch. We have each other's information. And we've put down how people can listen to your show. What days does your show come
on? Typically, we're releasing either on Wednesdays or Thursdays.
Okay. But we can go right there and listen to it.
If you go to ronandbrianpodcast.com, it's got links to our social media. There's a player in the website, but it's got links to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, whatever area you listen to podcasts in, you can find a link on the website.
All right. Well, once again, thanks for coming, and stay safe.
You too.
Thank you.